Dude, did you know you can subscribe to onlywrestlers.com and keep in touch with your favorite wrestlers? The party never has to end.
This week's episode of One of a Kind with RVD is presented by Get Blitzed, and you can get 15% off your order when you head to get-blitz.com and use promo code RVD. Get 15% off.
One of a Kind with Rob Van Dam is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Vince said he's going to change it from ECW means anything goes to one Extreme Rules match per night.
Gary's got a couple of good input here. Here's one. He said, RVD and Tess had a great match a few years later in WWE's ECW. I think it was on Sci-Fi right before the Hardcore Holly match where he sliced his back. So
yeah, I bring this up a lot when people talk about or complain about the ECW on Sci-Fi, and I tell them, when it first opened up, it was pretty good, and I had some pretty damn good matches with Tess and Bob Holly and Sabu and Big Show. People forget about that, but there was a good several months, and then I guess it was after my suspension, but sometime down the road, not too far into it, Vince said he's going to change it from ECW means anything goes to one Extreme Rules match per night, and then the rest of the card you might as well be watching Raw or SmackDown. And I kicked and screamed, you're killing it. And he said, Rob, I have to have credibility in my referees. Which, okay, I get, but no, you don't. Save that for Raw and SmackDown and let ECW. And also they were watering it down anyway by sending every wrestler there for no reason that was part of a different show, made it confusing. I thought they should make ECW the place where anything goes. And then if you're going to send Kane and Matt Hardy from SmackDown for whatever reason, make it then there's a reason they're there to settle a score. You know what? I'm taking this to the next level. I'll see you next week at ECW. And, boom, then that means – and then you get a hardcore match, and then it means something, But anyway, that's what I wanted. And instead, ECW became just like any other, like Raw or SmackDown, except more confusing. And that's why I have said and been caught saying that sometimes it did seem like ECW was brought back to distinguish.
Yeah.
Extinguish.
Extinguish. Yeah. Good call.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on it, but distinguished felt right at the time.
Yeah.
Rob, last week we kind of touched upon WWE, the ECW version, the WWE version of ECW, and I thought it was a really, really cool concept that you came up with. That you were like, oh, it could have been eventually, if they kept with the trend that it was, that it could have been a settling ground for wrestlers too, where it's just like if they're on the SmackDown brand or the Raw brand, they'll be like, hey, let's settle the score down in ECW and make it happen. But I guess I kind of wanted to follow up with it too in regards to how it was kind of neat. And you mentioned this too last week, was that they were incorporating some wrestlers that were like outside of the ECW realm, from like a Hardcore Holly and stuff like that kind of fit in that vibe and that mode. And then the Kurt Angle with the mouth guard and the intensity kind of stuff. And it would have been neat to see it kind of go from that thing. And then I co-hosted with Blue Meanie this past week. I tagged in for his co-host this week. And he happened to mention too how he thought maybe ECW would have evolved into what if the original ECW. I'll clarify, the original ECW might have evolved into what ROH kind of became later on, to kind of adapt to the time period where it was like, more so the wrestling style and certain things like that. Could you have foreseen something like that maybe with ECW if like the financials all lined up and everything kind of became more of a television success for the original ECW?
If I understand right, when you say ECW could have been more like ROH, are you just saying that they could have compromised some of their unacceptable values to meet halfway with as a wrestling promotion on TV?
Yeah, kind of in a way, kind of like to maybe be more marketable for mainstream, I guess. Like so that to be a more viable kind of product in certain ways. Would you think that would be an appropriate route for it to take, or do you think it could have kind of survived a little bit longer the way it was doing, the way you guys did it? You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it now. I hadn't thought of it before working. We would have hated all the compromise because what made ECW so special was the very magic that they were taking away by adding rules. So at first they said, Jerry used to say every show, ECW means anything goes. And so that's why it would have been really cool if that would have been like the court to settle disputes.
Yeah.
And when I first found out that they were, and it's, like you mentioned Bob Holly, and, some of those guys were great ECW wrestlers. They weren't in the original, but Paul knew that they would be very good, have what it took. And so there's those guys, but what bothered, and that was cool. What bothered me though was the guys that weren't even on ECW wrestling on ECW shows. Like that was nothing but poison in my mind because all it was confusing. And I know like Matt Hardy and Kane and I don't know who else. A lot of this was when they started doing this.
Yeah.
But I started hearing those guys were on. That's what I was thinking. Was that'd be cool if you send guys to ECW, make an angle out of it, and then you got something special. Like they go there, beat the shit out of each.
Uh-oh. I think Rob froze.
Whoa, I thought you froze.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Which one of us froze, gang? You tell us in the chat. Well, we're both back, so
okay.
But you would talk about selling the score. You were saying how like getting those guys from outside WWE or from the WWE realm coming into ECW to sell scores.
And that would have been cool if you let the angle build to a point where they wanted to fight with where anything goes, and fight with chairs, weapons, fight in the crowd, get bloody. That would have been really cool, and it would have built ECW up based on its own natural foundation. So since they didn't do that and instead polluted the waters by continuing to have non-ECW wrestlers on the show, I mean, it didn't make sense. These guys aren't on ECW. Why do you have them on? And I know, like, between the Raw and SmackDown, a lot of times I was on the Raw brand, but I'd be on the SmackDown show too. But you know what? That's confusing too.
Mm-hmm.
And they would do that. But then they did that with ECW too. And this is a new brand that we're trying to distinguish. And then for you to all of a sudden go from ECW means anything goes to meaning you got one Extreme Rules match per night, and then you're gonna the talent pool is gonna be a who's who in the business that's not even in ECW. It was, that's where you start approaching that conversation of was it destined to fail? Did they intentionally want it to fail?
Yeah. And like that's the thing too, is like it was so confusing, and it just became like a third brand that was the same of SmackDown and of Raw, where it's just like there was no delineation of it. And like that was an ongoing problem with like, hey, okay, you have a draft, you do the WWE draft and whatever, and then there's still that crossover that happens and there's no distinguishing. It was very confusing, and I think it hurt the ECW brand. And plus you'd bring in wrestlers, that were just outside of it, and okay, they're wrestling the same style that you would see on SmackDown or Raw or everything like that. And I thought it was neat that they would incorporate new guys, like they would introduce them in ECW as rookies and stuff like that. But I would have loved to see it make a little bit more sense. Like somebody like CM Punk getting introduced into ECW made sense if you wanted to build him up and kind of had him, get into that vibe or something like that. But it's just like they did it a little too weird, and it just didn't feel significant,
I understand he went straight to locker room leader.
That's what, you were saying. Yeah. Straight to he got drafted as a locker room leader for that.
Yeah.
So, no, but I thought that was an interesting conversation. I did think ECW at the beginning had a lot of promise and stuff like that. That for the WWE aspect of it, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, there's might be something here." And it's a shame it didn't kind of work out. Meanie mentioned too, and maybe you said this too. I can't remember, but the ECW zombie was originally supposed to be an alien, but Sci-Fi said, "Well, no, an alien would shoot somebody with laser beams or something like that," and then they changed it to a zombie. Did you hear that story?
I knew it was supposed to be a Martian, and they changed it to a zombie. I didn't hear anything about lasers.
I
heard this through Paul when we were having daily conversations about they want to do 7 really stupid things. Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna get them to cave on 4 of them. 3 of them we have to let go. That would happen every day like that. And one of them was they're gonna have they want to have this Martian come out, but we got it. So when he comes out, Sandman canes the shit out of him, and then that way it won't be that bad. Okay, why a Martian? Because it's a sci-fi channel, okay, I guess, whatever. And then it ended up being a zombie.
Meanie said too that he would see the guy that played the zombie on like the independent scene or at conventions or something like that, and he would be apologizing for what happened. He's like, "Dude, it's a payday. You don't got to apologize."
Right. That's funny. Knew it was wrong.
Yeah. He was like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "Oh man."